Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku controlled the Arc Reactor core. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The world was not fair. Izuku Midoriya had learned this truth at the age of 4, when the doctor's callous words had shattered his reality like a dropped glass. But knowing a truth and living through its most brutal application were two very different things. At 14, the unfairness of the world smelled like burnt sugar and sewage. Izuku walked home from Aldera Junior High, his shoulders hunched under the weight of a yellow backpack and a heavier, invisible burden. His latest notebook, Hero Analysis for the Future No. 13, was tucked safely against his chest, though its scorched cover, courtesy of Katsuki Bakugo's explosion, flaked ash onto his uniform. If you want to be a hero that badly, there's a quick way to do it. Believe that you'll be born with a quirk in the next life and take a swan dive off the roof. Bakugo's words echoed in the hollow chambers of his mind. Izuku grit his teeth, forcing the tears back. He wouldn't do it. He wouldn't give up. But the logic of the world was becoming harder to argue with. Heroes were born, not made. All Might was a god among men, and Izuku was a pebble on the roadside. He took the shortcut under the underpass. It was cooler here, the shadows stretching long and dark. He muttered to himself, a coping mechanism he'd perfected over a decade. Ignore him. Just keep analyzing. Maybe if I focus on support equipment? Or strategy? There has to be a way. A gurgling sound rose from the sewer grate behind him. Before Izuku could turn, a tidal wave of viscosity slammed into him. It tasted like rot. It felt like drowning in wet cement. Green slime forced its way into his mouth, his nose, cutting off the scream that died in his throat. A medium-sized invisibility cloak. A wet, rasping voice hissed in his ear. You'll do nicely, kid. Don't struggle. It'll only hurt for about 45 seconds. Panic, cold and sharp, spiked through Izuku. He clawed at the fluid, but his fingers found no purchase. He was dying. Here, in a tunnel, unnamed and unremembered. I didn't even get to try, he thought, his vision spotting with black. I didn't even get to start. Clang. The manhole cover rocketed into the ceiling. Fear not, kid, the voice boomed, reverberating off the concrete walls with enough force to rattle Izuku's teeth. Because I am here. Through the blurring slime, Izuku saw him. The blonde hair, the impossible muscular form, the smile that defied despair. All Might. A blast of wind pressure, a Texas smash, obliterated the villain's hold. Izuku was thrown back, gasping, air rushing into his lungs as the slime scattered into puddles. The rest was a blur. All Might collecting the villain into soda bottles. Izuku asking for an autograph, only to find it already signed in his notebook. The sheer awe of standing before his idol. And then, the mistake. All Might leaped away, launching himself into the sky. Izuku, driven by a desperation he couldn't control, had grabbed onto the hero's leg. They had landed on a rooftop. The steam had cleared, and the truth had been laid bare. The emaciated form. The wound that looked like a spiderweb of agony on the hero's side. The reality of the symbol of peace. Pro-heroes are always risking their lives, All Might had said, his voice lacking its usual boom. I cannot simply say, you can become a hero even without power. The door to the roof closed. Izuku was left alone. The sun began to set, casting the city in a bruised purple hue. Izuku walked down the stairs, his legs numb. The rejection from Kaken was expected. The rejection from society was routine. But the rejection from All Might? That was the final nail. He's right, Izuku thought, stepping out onto the street. It was a nice dream. But that's all it was. Explosions thundered in the distance. Izuku flinched. Smoke was rising from the shopping district, billowing black and thick against the twilight sky. His feet moved before his brain could stop them. It was instinct, the moth to the flame. When he arrived at the crowd, he saw the nightmare. The Tatooine shopping district was a war zone. Fires raged, licking at the sides of buildings, and in the center of the inferno, the sludge villain had returned. It's my fault, Izuku whispered, horror gripping his stomach. I distracted him. I made him drop the bottles. And then he saw the hostage, ash-blonde hair, eyes wide with a terror they had never shown before. Kaken. The heroes stood idly by. Death Arms, Kamiri Woods, Empty Lady, they were all making excuses. My quirk isn't suitable. I can't get close. We have to wait for someone with the right affinity. Bakugo was suffocating. The villain was drowning him, using his explosions to wreck the surroundings. Izuku didn't think. Later, people would ask him why. They would ask if he had a death wish. But in that moment, there was no thought, no logic, no fear. There was only the image of his tormentor's eyes pleading for help. Izuku sprinted past the police line. Hey! Stop him! Kid, you'll get yourself killed! Izuku ignored them. He hurled his backpack at the villain. It was a pathetic attack, but the heavy buckle struck the slime's eye. The villain roared, flinching. For a split second, Bakugo's mouth was free. Kaken! Izuku screamed, clawing at the sludge. I couldn't just stand there and watch you die. Get off me, you nerd! Bakugo hacked, trying to ignite his palms. The villain recovered faster than the heroes anticipated. The sludge coalesced, forming a massive, whip-like tendril of Makin debris. You annoying little fly! The villain swung. It wasn't a punch. It was a sweeping demolition strike intended to crush both boys against the pavement. But the swing went wide, striking the support pillar of the adjacent building, a structure already weakened by Bakugo's earlier explosions. The concrete shattered. The steel groaned. Above them, a massive advertising sign and a tangle of construction rebar tore free from the building's facade. Look out! Death Arms screamed. Izuku shoved Bakugo. He put every ounce of his meager strength into the push, sending the explosive boy skidding out of the blast zone. But for Izuku, there was no escape. He looked up. He saw the jagged, rusted end of a 3-inch steel rebar rod plummeting toward him. Time seemed to dilate. He saw All Might in the crowd, skinny and helpless, clutching his chest. He saw Bakugo reaching out. He saw the fire. I'm sorry, Mom. The metal struck. It wasn't a thud. It was a crunch, followed by a sound like a wet bag dropping. The rebar pierced Izuku's chest, just left of the sternum, driving him into the ground. The impact kicked up a cloud of dust and pulverized concrete, obscuring the boy from the world. Detroit. Smash! The wind pressure arrived a second too late. All Might, pushed past his limit, obliterated the slime villain with a punch that changed the weather. Rain began to fall from the pressure change, dousing the fires. Silence fell over the district. Kid? Death Arms stepped forward, waving away the dust. Hey kid, are you, oh god. All Might deflated, steam pouring off him, but he rushed to the center of the crater. There, pinned to the asphalt like a butterfly in a display case, was Izuku Midoriya. The steel rod was embedded deep in his chest. Blood, bright and oxygenated, bubbled up around the metal with every shallow, rattling breath. Don't move him! A paramedic screamed, rushing through the stunned heroes. Izuku stared up at the sky. The rain felt cold on his face. He couldn't feel his legs. He couldn't feel his arms. He could only feel a burning, white-hot star of agony in the center of his chest. Is this what it means to be a hero? Darkness swallowed him before he got an answer. Mustafa General Hospital ICU. 48 hours later. The beeping was the first thing that came back. A rhythmic, monotonous beep, 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 that served as the metronome for his existence. Izuku opened his eyes. The light was blinding. His throat felt like he had swallowed broken glass. Izuku! His mother's face hovered into view. She looked 10 years older than she had 2 days ago. Her eyes were swollen red, dark bags hanging beneath them. She gripped his hand so hard it hurt, but he welcomed the pain. It meant he was alive. Mom! He croaked. Sure, baby, don't talk. Just rest. Inko Midoriya sobbed, pressing his hand to her cheek. A doctor entered the room. He was a tall man with a quirk that gave him elongated fingers, holding a clipboard with a grim expression. Midoriya-kun, the doctor said softly. Welcome back. You gave us quite a scare. Izuku tried to sit up, but a sharp jolt in his chest slammed him back down. He gasped, clutching at the hospital gown. Underneath the fabric, he felt something hard. Something cold. A circular port protruding from his skin. What? Easy, the doctor said, stepping closer. He pulled up a chair. I need you to listen to me very carefully, Izuku. The injury you sustained was catastrophic. The rebar destroyed a significant portion of your sternum and missed your heart by millimeters. However, it did shatter several ribs, and shrapnel, tiny shards of metal, was driven into the surrounding tissue. The doctor tapped a backlit X-ray on the wall. Izuku squinted at it. It was a mess of white noise around his heart. We removed the large rod, the doctor explained. But the shrapnel, it's too deep. It's embedded in the arterial walls and the pericardium. We cannot remove it surgically. The trauma would kill you instantly. Izuku stared at the X-ray. So, it's still in there? Yes. And it's moving. Every time your heart beats, it risks pushing those shards into the heart muscle itself. To prevent this, we have installed an electromagnet into your chest cavity. The doctor gestured to the device under Izuku's gown. It's powered by a heavy-duty medical battery you'll need to carry with you. The magnet keeps the shrapnel suspended in place, away from your heart. As long as that magnet is powered, you will live. Izuku processed the words slowly. A magnet. Keeping me alive. What about school? Izuku asked. Hero training? The doctor sighed. He took off his glasses. Izuku. You are tethered to a battery. Any significant physical impact could dislodge the magnet or the shrapnel. High heart rates increase the risk of arterial rupture. You cannot run. You cannot fight. You certainly cannot be a hero. The silence that followed was heavier than the steel that had crushed him. You're lucky to be alive, son. You need to find a new dream. One that doesn't involve stress or physical exertion. Inko began to cry again, burying her face in the bedsheets. Izuku didn't cry. He felt oddly detached. It was as if the shrapnel had severed his ability to feel sadness, leaving only a cold, hard void. A new dream. He looked out the window. A bird landed on the sill, chirping, before flying away into the vast, open sky. I'm grounded, he realized. Forever. 3 weeks later, the apartment was quiet. Izuku sat at his desk, the glow of his computer monitor illuminating his pale face. A heavy lead-acid battery sat on the floor next to his chair, a thick cable snaking up under his shirt to the circular port in his chest. It was cumbersome. It was humiliating. He had to wheel it around on a small trolley like luggage. School had been hell. He hadn't been bullied. That would have been preferable. Instead, he was treated like fine china. People whispered when he walked by. That's the kid. Almost died. Crippled. Even Bakugo hadn't said a word. He just stared at Izuku with a complex expression, rage mixed with a sickening amount of guilt, and looked away whenever their eyes met. Izuku hated it. He hated the pity. He hated the battery. He hated the constant, low-level hum in his chest that reminded him of his fragility. A new dream, he muttered, typing into the search bar. He had been looking for support item designs. If he couldn't be a hero, maybe he could build things for them. But standard support tech felt lacking. It was all derivative of quirks. It relied on the user having a power to amplify. He needed something else. He needed to understand the thing inside him. He delved into medical forums. From there, into bioengineering. And then, deep into the archives of the pre-quirk era. The internet was a fractured place. When quirks appeared, society had collapsed for a century. Much of the old knowledge had been lost or encrypted in data dumps that nobody cared to look at anymore because why build a jetpack when you can fly? But Izuku looked. He had nothing but time. He found an encrypted file server from a defunct American corporation, Stark Industries. The name was barely a footnote in history books, a titan of industry that crumbled when the superhuman economy took over. Izuku cracked the encryption. It wasn't hard. The code was archaic, based on logic rather than quirk-based algorithmic shifting. What he found made his breath itch. Blueprints. Theories. A dissertation on something called arc reactor technology. Self-sustaining energy via palladium core ionization. Izuku leaned in, his eyes scanning the dense equations. The math was advanced, doctoral-level physics. But Izuku's mind, honed by years of analyzing complex quark interactions, latched onto the patterns. This isn't just a battery, Izuku realized, his heart rate spiking, triggering a warning beep from his chest monitor. This is a miniature fusion reactor. Clean energy. Infinite sustain. He looked at the diagram. The shape, it was roughly the same size as the hole in his chest. The current electromagnet keeping him alive was powered by chemical batteries. They were heavy, inefficient, and ran out. But this? Output, 3 gigajoules per second. Izuku sat back, his hands trembling. That kind of energy output was monstrous. It was more power than Kaminari could output without frying his brain. It was enough to run a city block, or enough to power a suit of armor. The thought struck him like a bolt of lightning. The doctor said his body was too weak. That his heart couldn't take the strain, so I don't use my body. He looked at his hands. They were scarred, calloused from writing, but weak. If the vessel is broken, build a new vessel. Izuku stood up. The cable tugged at his chest, but he didn't feel the weight anymore. He grabbed a fresh notebook. He didn't write Hero Analysis number 14. He wrote, Project, Iron Heart, Dagoba Municipal Beach Park, Month 2. The beach was a graveyard of the old world. Tires, broken appliances, rusted cars, trash piled as high as hills. It was here that All Might had planned to train him. Now, it was Izuku's hardware store. It was raining again. Izuku wore a yellow raincoat, his battery pack strapped to a dolly he pulled through the sand. He wasn't cleaning the beach. He was scavenging. Copper wire, check, he muttered, stripping a rusted alternator from a sedan. Capacitors, these are fried, but I can rebuild them. He needed palladium. That was the bottleneck. It was a rare metal, expensive and hard to find. He found it in the most unlikely place. The guidance systems of decommissioned pre-quirk missiles that had been illegally dumped in the far sector of the beach. It was dangerous work. One wrong move and the residual propellant could blow him up. But Izuku worked with surgical precision. He wore magnifying goggles he'd repaired himself, his fingers moving deftly among the wires. Midoriya? Izuku jumped, dropping his screwdriver. He spun around, shielding his scavenged loot. Standing at the edge of the trash pile, holding a bento box, was a skeleton of a man. Tashinori Yagi. All Might, Izuku breathed. He hadn't spoken to the hero since the hospital. I saw you from the road, the hero said, his voice awkward. He walked closer, his shoes sinking in the wet sand. I thought you might be cleaning? But you're taking things. I'm building, Izuku said, his voice firmer than he expected. All Might looked at the dolly, at the battery pack, at the pile of scrap metal. Sadness washed over his gaunt face. Young Midoriya, I haven't visited because I am ashamed. You suffered because of my negligence. I crushed your dream, and then I failed to protect you. You saved me, Izuku corrected. You saved everyone, but at what cost? All Might gestured to the battery. I wanted to come to you. To offer you something. But now... He trailed off. He had intended to offer one for all, but a boy with a hole in his chest couldn't handle the raw power of the quirk. It would blow his limbs off, or stop his heart instantly. You don't have to pity me, Izuku said, turning back to the missile casing. He pried a chip loose. I'm not done yet. What are you building? Izuku looked at the component in his hand. A small ring of silver metal. Palladium. A heart, Izuku said. A better one. All Might stared at him. He saw something in the boy's green eyes. It wasn't the fanboy worship of before. It was something harder. Sharper. It reminded him of the iron will of his predecessor, Nana Shimura. Be careful, my boy, All Might said softly. Don't push yourself too hard. I won't, Izuku lied. As All Might walked away, Izuku looked down at the palladium. I'm going to push myself until I break, or until I fly. The Midoriya apartment, Izuku's bedroom, month 3. The room smelled of solder and ozone. Inko Midoriya worried constantly, but she didn't stop him. She saw the light returning to her son's eyes, even if it was manic and obsessive. She brought him meals, which he ate with one hand while soldering with the other. Izuku had transformed his desk into a high-tech workbench. He had built a holographic projector using parts from broken smartphones and a salvaged lens. It displayed the schematic of the arc reactor rotating in the air. Analysis, Izuku muttered to himself. The geometry of the palladium ring is key. It needs to maximize ion flow while minimizing thermal radiation. If it gets too hot, it cooks my insides. If it's too cold, the magnet fails and I die. He was working on the Mark I. It was ugly. It was a ring of brass and steel, scavenged from piping and car parts. The center held the palladium core, wrapped in hand-wound copper coils. He had run the simulations 1,000 times. The math worked. But theory and practice were different beasts. Tonight's the night, he whispered. He looked at the clock. 2 a.m. His mother was asleep. Izuku cleared his desk. He set up a mirror. He laid out his tools, a scalpel, wire cutters, a soldering iron, and the reactor. He took off his shirt. The sight of his chest was still jarring. The scar tissue was pink and angry. The metal port for the electromagnet sat in the center, the wires running out to the heavy battery on the floor. He had to disconnect the battery, remove the old magnet assembly, and insert the arc reactor. The doctor had said he had seconds before the shrapnel would move. Okay, Izuku breathed. He was sweating. Okay. He hooked up the arc reactor to a test lead. It hummed. A soft, white light began to glow from the palladium ring. It was stable. Step 1, disconnect. Izuku reached for the cable connecting his chest to the floor battery. His hands shook. He forced them to steady. 3, 2, 1. He yanked the cable. The silence was instant. The hum of the medical magnet died. Immediately, a cold pressure seized his chest. Pain, sharp and terrifying, spiked near his heart. He gasped, dropping the cable. Move! Move! His vision blurred. The shrapnel was shifting. The blood flow was turbulent. With trembling fingers, he grabbed the Mark I reactor. It felt warm. He lined it up with the port in his chest. The fit had to be perfect. He jammed it in. Gah! Izuku screamed through gritted teeth as metal scraped against bone. He twisted the device, locking the flanges into the subdermal mounts the surgeons had left. It wasn't connecting. The wires, he had to bridge the connection to his nervous system to regulate the field. Darkness crept into the edges of his vision. He was passing out. No! Not here! Not like this! He grabbed the exposed leads of the reactor and jammed them into the port contacts. Spark! A jolt of pure electricity arched through his torso. Izuku arched his back, a silent scream tearing from his throat. The smell of singed flesh filled the room, and then, the hum. It wasn't the low, pitiful buzz of the medical battery. This was a roar. A turbine spinning up. Horror Tcharyum. The light in the room shifted. The white glow from his chest intensified, turning a brilliant, electric blue. It shone through his skin, illuminating the veins like a roadmap of energy. Izuku collapsed back into his chair, panting. The pain was gone. He took a deep breath. Then another. The air tasted sweet. He looked down. Embedded in his chest, glowing like a captured star, was the arc reactor. He felt incredible. It wasn't just that the pain was gone. He felt awake. The reactor was outputting excess energy, and his body was absorbing it. His nerves were firing faster. His brain felt like it had been upgraded from a dial-up connection to fiber optic. Izuku stood up. He didn't need the dolly. He didn't need the cable. He picked up the heavy lead-acid battery that had been his anchor for months. He lifted it with one hand. It felt light. He squeezed. The plastic casing of the battery cracked under his grip. Izuku stared at his hand. The blue light from his chest reflected in his eyes. He walked to the mirror. The boy staring back wasn't the victim. He wasn't the quirkless failure. He was something new. He grabbed a marker and walked to his wall, where a poster of All Might still hung. He didn't tear it down. Instead, he pinned a blueprint next to it. The blueprint for a suit. The entrance exam is in 7 months, Izuku whispered to the silent room. The blue light pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat. I have a lot of work to do. Dagoba Beach, month 6. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Watch the voltage, Greenie. Izuku adjusted the dial on his gauntlet, dampening the output. Sorry, Hatsum-san. The capacitors are still a bit twitchy. May Hatsum, covered in grease and sporting steampunk goggles, grinned maniacally. She was the only person Izuku had met who matched his level of insanity. He had found her scavenging parts for her babies a month ago, and once she saw the reactor, she had practically adopted him. Twitchy is good. Twitchy means power. May cackled, hitting the metal chassis with a wrench. But seriously, this alloy is garbage. If you fire the repulsors at 100%, your arm is going to melt. They were in a makeshift workshop they had cleared out in a shipping container on the beach. Standing in the center was the frame of the Mark I suit. It was bulky. Industrial. It looked less like a superhero costume and more like a walking tank made of scrap metal. Exposed hydraulic pistons hissed as Izuku moved his arm. Thick cables ran from the chest piece to the gauntlets. It's not about looking pretty, Izuku grunted, lifting a heavy steel plate and welding it to the thigh guard. It's about surviving the entrance exam. The robots are heavily armored. Yeah? Function over form. Boring. May tightened a bolt on the back. But the hydraulic assist is working. You're lifting 400 pounds like it's a feather. Izuku looked at the suit. It was a collaborative effort. May understood the mechanics, the gears, the pistons, the movement. Izuku understood the energy, the propulsion, the weapon systems, the coding. Let's test the flight stabilizers, Izuku said. He stepped into the boots. They were heavy, weighted with iron saws and makeshift thrusters. Powering up repulsors, Izuku commanded. The reactor in his chest flared. The whine of charging capacitors filled the container. 3, 2, 1. Izuku flexed his palms and engaged the boot jets. Boom! A concussive blast of force slammed into the sand. Izuku shot up 3 feet, hovered for a chaotic second, flailing his arms, and then slammed back down, face first into a pile of tires. Success! May cheered, clapping. You didn't explode, Izuku groaned, rolling over. Sand coated his faceplate. Stabilizers need work. He lay there for a moment, looking at the sky. He was exhausted. His body ached from the G-forces. But he was laughing. A breathless, genuine laugh. He was doing it. He was actually doing it. UA High School Entrance Exam Day, Month 10. The gates of UA towered over the students. Thousands of hopefuls swarmed the entrance, buzzing with nervous energy. Izuku Midoriya stood at the back. He wore a baggy trench coat to hide the bulk of his undersuit, but the metallic clank of his footsteps drew stares. He carried a large, reinforced suitcase in his hand. Out of my way, Deku! Bakugo marched past him, shouldering him aside. But this time, Izuku didn't stumble. The hydraulic servos in his leg brace whirred, locking his stance instantly. He stood like a statue. Bakugo paused, glancing back. He frowned. What the hell are you wearing? You trying to sneak in a bomb? Just my equipment, Kaken, Izuku said calmly. His voice lacked the stutter. Bakugo narrowed his eyes. He sensed a change. The pebble was different. Whatever. Don't die in the practical. It'd be a waste of paperwork. Bakugo stomped off. Izuku took a breath. He touched his chest. Through the fabric, the reactor hummed, a reassuring presence. The written exam. It was a joke. Izuku breezed through the physics and math sections. He finished 20 minutes early, spending the rest of the time sketching improvements for the suit's heat dissipation. The practical exam. This was it. Izuku stood in the waiting area of Battle Center B. The other examinees were stretching, showing off their quirks. Some had mutation types, others were emitting sparks or floating objects. They looked at Izuku. He had taken off the trench coat. Underneath, he wore the Mark I. It was crude. It was painted a dull olive green. Spray paint was cheap. The wiring was visible in the joints. The chest piece glowed ominously. He wore a modified motorcycle helmet with a glowing HUD slit. Is that cosplay? One student snickered. Maybe he thinks this is a Comic-Con. Hey, metal boy. You realize we're fighting giant robots, right? That tin can is gonna get crushed. Izuku didn't respond. He was running diagnostics. Reactor output, 100%. Hydraulics, online. Repulsors charged. Fuel cells green. The gates began to open. President Mick's voice boomed over the speakers. And start. The other students hesitated. What are you waiting for? There are no countdowns in real battles. Go! 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 Izuku moved. He didn't run. He engaged the thrusters on his back and boots. Whoosh! A blast of compressed air and energy propelled him forward. He shot past the stunned students, leaving a trail of kicked-up dust. What the? Izuku was the first one into the city. A one-pointer, a swift, wheeled robot, burst through a wall, targeting him. Target acquired, Izuku whispered. He raised his right hand. The palm repulsor whined. BLAM. A beam of concussive blue energy slammed into the robot's center mass. The metal crumpled like paper. The robot was thrown backward, crashing into a building and exploding. 1 point. A three-pointer dropped from the sky, a massive missile-firing hulk. Izuku engaged his knee hydraulics. He leaped 20 feet into the air, soaring over the robot's head. As he flipped, he fired both hand repulsors downward. Double blast. The recoil kept him airborne for a second longer. The beam sheared through the robot's neck joint. Its head toppled off. 4 points. The other students caught up, but they stopped to watch. Izuku was a whirlwind of industrial violence. He didn't fight like a martial artist. He fought like a fighter jet. He strafed targets, sliding on his boot thrusters. He used the suit's enhanced strength to rip a two-pointer in half. Is that a quirk? Someone yelled. Is his quirk robot? No, another said, watching the exhaust vent from Izuku's back. That's tech. That's pure engineering. In the observation room, the teachers watched the screens in silence. Who is that? Midnight asked, leaning forward. Examinee 2234. Izuku Midoriya, Nisa said, sipping his tea. His eyes twinkled. Quirk none? Quirkless? All Might leaned against the wall, his heart swelling with pride. He registered as a support item user. But the sheer output of that suit, it rivals a pro. He's efficient, Aizawa muttered, his eyes narrowed. But he's relying on the hardware. What happens when the battery runs dry? I don't think it runs dry, Aizawa, Cementos noted. Look at the chest. That energy signature is off the charts. It's self-sustaining. Back in the city, Izuku was panting. The suit was getting hot. The cooling vents hissed, releasing steam. 45 points. That should be enough. He slowed down, letting the other students get some points. He watched Uraraka float a robot. He saw Ida kick through another. Then, the ground shook. The siren blared. The 0-pointer, a monstrosity of metal, rose from the pavement. It was taller than the skyscrapers. Its mere movement created wind pressure that knocked students off their feet. Run! It's huge! The students fled. It was the logical choice. The 0-pointer was an obstacle to be avoided. Izuku turned to run as well. His suit was overheating. He had passed. There was no reason to fight this thing. Ow! A cry for help. Izuku's HUD zoomed in. Under a pile of rubble, directly in the path of the giant robot, was the girl with the gravity quirk. Uraraka. She was pinned. The robot raised a massive tread's foot, ready to crush the area. Izuku stopped. Logic says run. Survival instinct says run, but the heart says go. Power redirect. Izuku barked at his suit's primitive voice command. Route all auxiliary power to the unibeam. Warning, core overheat imminent. Do it! Izuku turned. He crouched, engaging the boot thrusters to maximum. Boom! He launched himself like a missile. He flew straight up, ignoring the G-force warning screaming in his ear. He ascended past the robot's legs, past its torso, until he was face to face with the colossal machine. Hey, ugly! Izuku yelled. The robot's sensors focused on the tiny gnat hovering in front of it. Izuku spread his arms. The chest piece, the arc reactor, glowed with a blinding intensity. The blue light turned white. The air around him crackled with static electricity. Smash! He didn't punch. He unleashed the unibeam. A concentrated torrent of pure plasma erupted from his chest. It hit the 0-pointer's face. The metal didn't just bend, it evaporated. The beam cored straight through the robot's head, melting the central processor and severing the neck support. The recoil sent Izuku spinning backward, his suit smoking. The giant robot halted. Its eye lights flickered and died. Slowly, ominously, it tipped backward, crashing away from Uraraka with an earth-shattering thud. Silence. Izuku's thrusters sputtered. Fuel cells, depleted, the suit synthesized. He fell. Oh crap. He was falling from 50 feet. Suddenly, a slap across his face. He stopped in midair. Uraraka, sitting on a piece of floating rubble, had tapped him as he fell. Release! She gasped, pressing her fingers together. Izuku dropped the last 3 feet, landing hard on his back. The steam hissed from his armor. The chest light was dim, pulsing slowly. The buzzer sounded. Time's up. Izuku lay there, staring at the sky. The clouds were clearing. He couldn't move his arms. His suit was locked up. He smelled burnt wiring, but he was alive. And he had saved her. A shadow fell over him. He looked up to see Recovery Girl and a crowd of stunned students. My goodness, the old woman said, tapping his metal breastplate with her cane. What kind of quirk lets you shoot lasers from your chest, Sonny? Izuku clicked the release on his helmet. The faceplate hissed open, revealing a sweaty, grime-covered face with a smile that stretched from ear to ear. It's not a quirk, Izuku wheezed. It's science. He tapped the glowing circle over his heart. And it's iron. The first thing Izuku Midoriya noticed about his new life was the silence. Before the incident, his life had been a cacophony of anxiety. His heart had always beat a frantic, staccato rhythm of fear. Fear of Bakugo, fear of failure, fear of the future. Now, that biological drumming was gone, replaced by the steady, subsonic hum of the arc reactor. It was a sound felt more than heard, a vibration that traveled through his sternum and settled deep in his bones. It was the sound of power. Izuku sat at his desk, staring at his hands. It was 4 a.m. He hadn't slept in 2 days, yet he wasn't tired. His eyes burned slightly from staring at blueprints, but his mind was a racing engine that refused to idle. Cognitive processing speed has increased by approximately 40%, he muttered, his voice raspy in the quiet room. He grabbed a pen and scribbled the observation into a new notebook titled Subject: Iron Heart. Physiological data. Metabolic requirements have shifted. Caloric intake needs to double, but sleep requirements have halved. The reactor isn't just powering the electromagnet, it's supplementing my bioelectric field. He stood up and walked to the center of the room. He felt light. Too light. He picked up a grip strengthener, one of the heavy-duty ones he had bought online, rated for 60 kilograms. He squeezed. The metal spring groaned, and then, with a sharp snap, the handle sheared off. Izuku stared at the broken plastic. He hadn't used muscle for that. He had channeled the reactor's energy into his nervous system, overcharging the myofibrils in his forearm. Output exceeds structural integrity, he whispered. This was the problem. He was a Ferrari engine inside a Toyota Corolla. If he tried to punch someone with this enhanced energy coursing through him, he wouldn't just break their jaw, he would shatter his own arm. The human body wasn't designed to conduct gigajoules of energy. He needed a chassis. A shell. He looked at the wall where he had pinned the stolen Stark schematics. The Mark I. It was crude. It was ugly. But it was the only way to channel the star in his chest without killing himself. I need titanium, he murmured, pacing the room. The blue light from his chest cast long, dancing shadows. I need high-grade hydraulic servos. I need heat-resistant ceramics. I can't buy this stuff. Mom's savings are already thin from the hospital bills. He looked out the window toward the coast. The Dagoba Municipal Beach Park. People called it a dump. Izuku called it a parts catalog. Dagoba Beach. Month 2, the scavenger. The smell of the beach was a mix of salt, rust, and rotting seaweed. Mountains of trash obscured the horizon. Refrigerators, cars, broken furniture, and the occasional debris from villain fights that the city couldn't be bothered to process. Izuku wore heavy work boots, thick cargo pants, and a grease-stained tank top. The arc reactor glowed openly in the center of his chest, a stark contrast to the grime around him. He had stopped trying to hide it. It generated too much heat to keep covered under layers of fabric while he worked. He was currently waist-deep in the engine bay of a wrecked delivery truck, trying to pry out the transmission system. Come on, he grunted, bracing his foot against the fender. He didn't use tools. He channeled the energy. A flash of blue light traveled down his arms, visible under his skin like lightning. The metal groaned. With a shriek of tearing steel, he ripped the transmission free with his bare hands. He tossed the heavy component onto a makeshift sled made from a car hood. Hydraulics acquired, he said, wiping sweat from his forehead. Now for the armor plating. He moved deeper into the trash labyrinth. He was looking for a specific type of alloy used in pre-quirk construction, something heavy but durable. He found it in a pile of industrial piping. As he reached for a particularly promising section of pipe, a hand shot out from the other side of the trash pile and grabbed it. Mine! Izuku jumped back, startled. Whoa! A girl popped up from behind the debris. She was covered in oil, her pink dreadlocks tied back in a chaotic bun. She wore steampunk-esque goggles that magnified her eyes to comical proportions. I saw it first, she declared, pointing a wrench at him. That's a vintage seamless steel alloy pipe. Do you know how hard it is to find seamless piping with this diameter? My babies need it, Izuku blinked. Your babies? My inventions. She vaulted over the trash pile, landing ungracefully but with enthusiasm. She got right in his face, ignoring personal space. I'm building a high-mobility omnidirectional grapple system. This pipe is perfect for the pneumatic cylinder housing. Hand it over, Greenie. Izuku looked at the pipe, then at the girl. You're building a grapple system? With steel? That's too heavy. The inertia would throw off your center of gravity. The girl paused. She blinked, her crosshair eyes zooming in on him. Huh! If you use steel for the housing, Izuku explained, his analysis mode kicking in, you'll need a counterweight, which increases the total mass. You should be looking for aluminum titanium alloy. There's a wrecked villain bot in Sector 4, a three-pointer from UA's last disposal run. It has chassis plating made of Alti alloy. The girl's jaw dropped. She stared at him for a long, silent second. Then, a grin spread across her face that was equal parts terrifying and impressed. I like you, she said. She extended a grease-covered hand. May Hatsum. Future CEO of Hatsum Industries. And you are? Izuku Midoriya, he said, hesitantly shaking her hand. May's eyes suddenly drifted down. They locked onto the glowing blue circle in his chest. Whoa, she breathed. She leaned in closer, tapping the glass surface with her fingernail. Tink, tink. Is that cosmetic? No, the heat signature is real, and the magnetic field. She pulled a screwdriver from her pocket, and it stuck to Izuku's chest. Ha! It's magnetic. It's my heart, Izuku said, pulling the screwdriver off. Well, technically it's keeping shrapnel out of my heart. It's a fusion reactor. May froze. Fusion? Like cold fusion? Miniature arc synthesis? Palladium core, Izuku nodded. 3 gigajoules per second output. May looked like she was about to faint from sheer ecstasy. She grabbed his shoulders and shook him. Do you have any idea what I could build with that kind of power source? My babies are always limited by battery weight. But with that, we could make them fly. We could make them lift tanks. We could. I'm building a suit, Izuku interrupted. May stopped shaking him. A suit? An exoskeleton, Izuku corrected. To become a hero. But I'm good at the energy physics and the coding. I'm struggling with the mechanical linkage. The hydraulics keep seizing up. May looked at the pile of scrap on Izuku's sled. She looked at the transmission he had ripped out. Then she looked back at the reactor. I'll make you a deal, Midoriya, she said, her eyes gleaming with manic inspiration. You let me study that reactor. Let me see the schematics, the energy flow, everything, and I will help you build the greatest, most flashy, most dangerous suit this world has ever seen. Izuku hesitated. This was his secret. His survival. But he looked at his hands. He remembered the broken grip strengthener. He couldn't do this alone. He needed a mechanic. Deal, Izuku said. May whooped, pumping her fist in the air. Yes. Okay, first things first. That transmission is garbage. Too slow. We're going to strip the servos from that villain bot you mentioned. Let's go. She grabbed his arm and dragged him deeper into the junk. Izuku stumbled, but for the first time in months he smiled. He had a teammate. The workshop shipping container 404. Month 4. The blueprint and the bone. They had cleared out an abandoned shipping container near the edge of the beach. It became their sanctuary. Inside, it was a chaotic, organized mess. One wall was covered in maze drawings, complex, erratic sketches of gadgets and limbs. The other wall was Izuku's domain, neat, mathematical formulas and thermal dissipation charts. In the center stood the frame. It didn't look like a hero yet. It looked like a torture device. A skeleton of steel piping, exposed wires, and hydraulic pistons. Flex the elbow, May commanded. She was wearing a welding mask, sparks flying as she fused a joint. Izuku, standing inside the frame, gritted his teeth. He wore a skin-tight undersuit he had stitched together from neoprene to prevent chafing. He channeled power to his right arm. Work length. The metal arm jerked up, stopping at a 90-degree angle. Response time is 0.4 seconds, Izuku noted, looking at the laptop screen rigged to the suit. Too slow. If I'm fighting a speed type, I'm dead. It's the transmission fluid, May said, lifting her mask. Her face was smudged with soot. It's too viscous. We need something thinner, but with a higher boiling point. Or, she tapped her chin, we switch to electric actuators entirely. Ditch the fluid. Electric actuators draw more power, Izuku countered. You have a sun in your chest, Midoriya. May threw a wrench at him. He caught it with the suit's reflex, the metal clang echoing. Stop hoarding the power. Let it flow. If I draw too much, the suit overheats. I cook inside it. Then we add more vents. Bigger fans. It'll look cool. May ran over to a pile of computer parts. I found these high RPM cooling fans from a server farm dump. We strap these to the back. Like jet thrusters, Izuku sighed, but he adjusted the schematics. Fine. Electric actuators. But we need to shield the wiring. If I take an electric attack, I don't want to short out. They worked like that for hours. Days. Weeks. They argued over alloys. They fought over weapon systems. May wanted to install a net launcher in the crotch piece. Izuku vetoed it aggressively. Izuku wanted redundant life support systems. May thought they added too much weight. But slowly, the Mark-I took shape. It wasn't sleek like the Iron Man of the comics Izuku had read. It was brutal. It was a walking tank. The armor plating was mismatched, some gray, some rusted red, some polished steel. It was held together by heavy bolts and visible welds. But it was strong. One evening, while testing the leg servos, Izuku decided to try a jump. Power to lower extremities at 40%, Izuku commanded. The suit didn't have an AI yet, just a basic voice recognition script he'd written. Acknowledged. Izuku crouched. The servos whined, building pressure. Jump. Boom. He didn't just jump. He launched. He smashed through the roof of the shipping container, tearing the corrugated metal like paper, and soared 20 feet into the air. He flailed, panic rising. Thrusters! Thrusters! The boot jets, jury-rigged from propane tanks and modified nozzles, sputtered. He crashed back down into the sand outside, creating a crater. May poked her head out of the hole in the roof. 10 tenths for height. 2 tenths for the landing. You broke my roof, you nerd! Izuku lay in the sand, staring at the stars. The suit was heavy, pressing him down. But inside he was grinning. He had broken the roof. He had flown. Dagoba Beach. Month 7, the cleanup. The beach was changing. What had once been a wall of trash was now receding. Izuku wasn't just scavenging anymore. He was training. To pilot the Mark-I, he needed physical strength. The suit weighed nearly 200 pounds. While the servos helped with movement, the G-forces of flight and impact required a pilot with a core of steel. Every morning before school, Izuku would drag tires. He would lift I-beams. He would run sprints in the sand with the unpowered leg braces of the suit strapped to him, forcing his muscles to fight the dead weight. He wasn't the scrawny kid anymore. His muscles had grown dense, corded like wire. His back had broadened. The scar on his chest was surrounded by defined pectorals. He was clearing the beach, section by section. From the roadway, a gaunt figure watched him. All Might sat in his car, watching the boy work. He had been coming here once a week. He saw the pile of trash shrinking. He saw the boy dragging a refrigerator on his back. He's cleaning it, All Might whispered to himself. He's trying to restore the view. Even after everything, he still has the heart of a community servant. All Might gripped the steering wheel. The gulp gnawed at him. He had told the boy to give up. He had left him on that roof, and yet, the boy had nearly died saving someone, and now, despite his injury, he was working harder than any pro-hero. He has the spirit, All Might murmured. But does he have the vessel? All Might exited the car. He adjusted his oversized suit, coughing slightly. Blood speckled his handkerchief. He wiped it away. He needed a successor. His time was running out faster than he anticipated. The injury from toxic chainsaw, no, from All for One, was aching. He walked down the stairs to the beach. Izuku was currently welding a massive steel plate onto the chest of the Mark I. He had the faceplate open. He looked up as All Might approached. All Might, Izuku said, flipping the welding mask up. He didn't stutter. He didn't fanboy. He just nodded. Young Midoriya, All Might said, forcing his signature smile. You have been busy. The beach, it looks incredible. You've cleared nearly half of it. I needed the parts, Izuku said, patting the hull of the suit. All Might looked at the suit. It was terrifying. A hulking mass of metal. It reminded him of a villain's weapon. Is this a support item? All Might asked carefully. It's a prosthesis, Izuku corrected. My body is broken. This is my shell. All Might frowned. You shouldn't have to go to such lengths. You are a child. I'm not a child, Izuku said, his voice hard. I died, All Might. I died on that pavement. The kid who wanted your autograph is gone. The one who woke up. He has work to do. All Might flinched. The words cut deep. Midoriya, All Might started, his voice serious. He deflated slightly, his posture dropping. I have watched you these past months. I have seen your drive. Your refusal to stay down. I was wrong to tell you that you couldn't be a hero. Izuku went still. He put down the welding torch. I have a secret, All Might said. A secret about my quirk. He explained it. The torch. The passing of power. One for all. The cultivation of power to be handed down to the next generation. I have been looking for a successor, All Might said, stepping closer. The setting sun cast long shadows over the scrap metal. Someone with the spirit of a true hero. Someone who moves without thinking to save others. You did that. You ran in when the pros stood back. All Might plucked a strand of golden hair from his head. He held it out. Izuku Midoriya. I want you to inherit my power. With One for All, your body, it would be strengthened. You wouldn't need this machine. You could be the symbol of peace. The wind blew across the beach, rattling the loose metal sheets. Izuku stared at the hair. It was everything he had ever wanted. Since he was 4 years old, he had prayed to any god who would listen for a quirk. For strength. To be like All Might. All he had to do was take it. He looked at the hair. Then he looked down at his own chest. The arc reactor hummed. A steady, rhythmic blue pulse. He thought about the last 10 months. He thought about the pain of the surgery. He thought about the cold nights reading physics papers until his eyes bled. He thought about May, screaming with laughter as they blew up a capacitor. He thought about the smell of ozone and solder. He thought about every screw, every bolt, every line of code in the Mark I. This suit wasn't just a shell. It was his sweat. His blood. His mind made manifest. If he took One for All, what happened to the Iron Heart? No, Izuku said. All Might blinked, stunned. I beg your pardon? I said no. Izuku stepped back. He tapped the reactor. You said I couldn't be a hero without a quirk. You told me to be realistic. Izuku's eyes burned with a green fire that matched the reactor's intensity. So I became realistic. I studied physics. I studied engineering. I built this. But, with One for All, you would be stronger. You wouldn't be limited by battery life or, I don't want to be given power, All Might, Izuku interrupted. Not anymore. If I take your power, I'm just All Might Jr. I'm just a vessel for your legacy. Izuku walked over to the Mark I. He placed his hand on the cold metal of the helmet. This power? This light? He gestured to his chest. I made this. Nobody gave it to me. Nobody can take it away. It's mine. He turned back to the stunned hero. I appreciate the offer, All Might. Really. It's an honor. But I'm going to be the first quirkless hero. I'm going to show the world that humanity doesn't need to wait for a genetic lottery to save itself. We can save ourselves. All Might stood there, the hair still held out in his hand. He looked at the boy. He expected to feel disappointed. He expected to feel panic that his successor had refused him. Instead, he felt, the boy was right. He didn't need one for all. He had already forged something stronger. All Might lowered his hand. A small, sad, but proud smile touched his lips. I see, All Might said softly. You have truly grown strong, young Midoriya. Stronger than I realized. I'll see you at UA, Izuku said, turning back to his work. I have a suit to finish. UA High School 1 week before exam. Month 9, the test pilot. Okay, brace yourself. May yelled over the roar of the wind. They were at an abandoned airfield on the outskirts of the city. Another one of May's acquisitions. She had broken the lock on the gate. Izuku stood on the runway. He was fully suited up. The Mark-I was complete. It stood 7 feet tall. The armor was thick, layered plates of scavenged titanium and steel. The chest glowed brightly. The helmet was blocky, with a thin horizontal slit for the HUD. System check. Izuku's voice came through the external speakers, modulated and metallic. Core output stable. Hydraulics green. Repulsors charged. Fuel supply 100%. Hit me, Izuku said. May grinned. She was holding a baseball pitching machine she had modified. Firing. Thwack. A baseball, traveling at 150 miles per hour, slammed into Izuku's chest plate. Clang. Izuku didn't budge. The ball disintegrated. Again, May cranked it up. Firing the heavy stuff, she triggered a trap she had set up. A massive log swung down from a crane. Izuku raised his left arm. The gauntlet word. He caught the log. The ground beneath his metal boots cracked, but he held it. Grip strength confirmed, Izuku noted. Activating Repulsor 1, he opened his palm. A high-pitched whine built up. Boom! A beam of concussive force blasted the log into splinters. Yes! May screamed, jumping up and down. It works! It works! Izuku looked at his hand. The metal was smoking. He looked up at the sky. Flight test, he commanded. Wait, Izuku, the stabilizers are still. He didn't wait. He crouched and fired. Fire erupted from his boots. The repulsors in his palms fired downward. He shot into the air. 20 feet. 50 feet. 100 feet. The ground fell away. The wind roared against his sensors. Altitude 300 feet, the suit's voice intoned. He was flying. He wasn't floating like Uraraka. He wasn't gliding. He was powering through gravity with brute force. He hovered there, overlooking the city. The lights of Muzidafu twinkled below. He saw the hospital where he had been told his life was over. He saw the school where he had been bullied. He saw the beach where he had sweated and bled. How's the view up there, Iron Man? May's voice crackled in his ear. It's... Izuku choked up. Tears welled in his eyes inside the helmet. It's perfect. Suddenly, a warning light flashed red. In his HUD. Warning, icing detected on flaps. Core temp dropping. Oh, Izuku said. What? What oh? I flew too high. The intake valves are freezing. The boot thruster sputtered. The flame died. Izuku dropped like a stone. Izuku! Restarting! Restarting! He frantically flipped switches inside the helmet. The ground was rushing up. 200 feet. 100 feet. Come on! Come on! He manually flushed the coolant lines, sending a surge of heat through the system. Thwim! The thrusters reignited at 20 feet. He slammed on the brakes. He hit the runway hard, carving a trench through the asphalt with his metal heels, sparks showering like fireworks. He slid for 50 yards before coming to a halt. Silence. Izuku? May's voice was shaky. The helmet hisses. The faceplate popped open. Izuku sat there, breathing hard, his face pale but eyes shining. Note to self, he wheezed. Installed the icing system for Mark II. May ran up and punched his armored shoulder. You idiot! You almost died! But I didn't, Izuku grinned. And we have data. The night before the exam, month 10, Izuku stood in his bedroom. The mark I stood in the corner, silent and imposing. It was hooked up to a charging station, though the arc reactor provided the main power. The cables were just running diagnostics. He held his notebook. Hero analysis for the future. He turned to the last page. It was blank. He picked up a pen. He didn't write about All Might. He didn't write about Kamui Woods. He drew a rough sketch of himself. Not the scrawny kid. The armored hero. Underneath, he wrote a single word. DKU. It means useless, Bakugo had said. Izuku looked at the suit. Not anymore, he whispered. Now, it's the call sign. He turned off the lights. The blue glow of his chest and the faint white eyes of the suit remained, watching over him in the dark. Tomorrow, Yue High School would meet the future. And the future was built of iron. The morning of the UA entrance exam was cold, the air crisp with the lingering chill of late February. For thousands of students across Japan, this day was the culmination of a lifetime of dreaming. It was the threshold to greatness, the gate to the pantheon of heroes. For Izuku Midoriya, it was a field test. He stood before the massive glass and steel barrier of the UA main gate, his breath misting in the air. He didn't wear the standard junior high uniform. Instead, he wore a heavy, oil-stained canvas jacket over a reinforced undersuit that hugged his frame like a second skin. Beside him, resting on the pavement, was a gargantuan, wheeled reinforced case made of matte black polymer. It was the size of a refrigerator and hummed with a faint, low-frequency vibration. Deploying anxiety dampeners, Izuku muttered to himself, tapping his fingers against his thigh. Heart rate is 85 BPM. Reactor output stable at 15% idle. He wasn't trembling. Not really. The 10 months of hell, the surgery, the rehabilitation, the sleepless nights in the shipping container with May, had burned the nervous stutter out of him. He was still Izuku, but he was an Izuku who had held a welding torch to his own chest plate. He had stared into the abyss of failure and built a bridge across it. Out of the way, Deku. The voice was low, guttural, and familiar. Izuku didn't flinch. He turned slowly to see Katsuki Bakugo standing there. The ash-blonde boy looked different too, bulkier, sharper. But his eyes were the same, burning red pits of arrogance. Bakugo stopped, his eyes drifting to the massive case Izuku was dragging. Moving services? Bakugo sneered, though there was a flicker of genuine confusion in his gaze. I thought I told you to quit. You gonna drag that luggage around the hero course? You'll be dead in 5 minutes. Izuku gripped the handle of the case. It's not luggage, Kaken. It's my quirk. Bakugo scoffed, smoke curling from his palms. You don't have a quirk. You have a battery. Don't think a few months of playing mechanic makes you one of us. We'll see, Izuku said simply. He didn't yell. He didn't argue. He just turned and walked through the gate, the heavy wheels of his case rumbling like thunder on the pavement. Bakugo stared at his back, his teeth grinding together. The pebble wasn't scared anymore. And that pissed him off more than anything. Part 1. The written exam. The written exam was held in a massive lecture hall that smelled of floor wax and graphite. Izuku sat in the back row, his heavy case parked against the wall after a brief, tense argument with the proctor, ectoplasm, who eventually allowed it after scanning it for explosives. The test began. Izuku flipped the packet open. Section 1, English. Section 2, Mathematics. Section 3, Hero Law Ethics. Section 4, General Science. Izuku picked up his pencil. For most students, this was a grueling test of academic endurance. For Izuku, who had spent the last 6 months decoding encrypted Stark Industries files and calculating thermal load distributions for titanium alloys, it was quaint. Question 14. Calculate the trajectory of a projectile with a mass of 5 kilograms launched at a 45-degree angle with an initial velocity of 50 meters per second, accounting for standard drag coefficient. Izuku scribbled the answer in seconds. Too simple. Doesn't account for wind shear or the Coriolis effect. Assuming a vacuum. He moved to the science section. Question 32. Explain the theoretical limits of quark singularity. Izuku smiled. He wrote a paragraph, then erased it. He wrote a dissertation in the margins. He cited papers from the pre-quark era regarding genetic evolution versus technological stagnation. His hand moved in a blur. The arc reactor in his chest hummed quietly, providing a steady stream of bioelectricity that kept his synapses firing at peak efficiency. He wasn't smarter because of the reactor. The genius was his own, but the reactor gave him the stamina of a machine. His hand didn't cramp. His eyes didn't tire. 2 hours into the 3-hour exam, Izuku put his pencil down. He looked around. Other students were sweating, erasing frantically, tugging at their hair. A girl with a ponytail in the front row, Momojayorozu, he'd later learn was also finished, sitting with perfect posture. Izuku closed his eyes and began to mentally run diagnostics on the Mark I's firmware. The targeting algorithm for the left gauntlet was lagging by 0.02 milliseconds during the last test. I need to optimize the code before the practical. He spent the remaining hour visualizing lines of C code in his head, debugging his suit, while the rest of the room struggled with quadratic equations. Part 2, the orientation. Everybody say hey. Present Mick's voice was a sonic weapon. It blasted through the auditorium, rattling the seats. Silence answered him. Tough crowd. The voice hero shrugged, adjusting his sunglasses. Okay, listeners. Let's get down to the main event. The practical exam. Izuku sat in the darkness, the blue glow of his chest hidden under his thick jacket. He listened intently as Mike explained the rules. 3 types of robots. 1 point, 2 points, 3 points. Destroy them to earn a score. This is battlefield simulation, Izuku whispered. Urban terrain. High density of targets. Mobility will be key. Excuse me. A hand shot up in the middle of the auditorium. A tall boy with glasses and severe posture stood up. The spotlight hit him. I have a question. The boy shouted, pointing at the brochure. There are 4 types of villains listed here, but you only mentioned 3. If this is a printing error, you should be ashamed. We are here to be molded into exemplary heroes. He then spun around and pointed a stiff finger directly at Izuku. And you? The one with the glowing chest and the giant box. Izuku blinked, the sudden attention making his anxiety spike for a second. And me? You've been muttering this whole time. It's distracting. If you're just here to sightsee or play with your toys, then you should leave immediately. The auditorium rippled with laughter. Izuku felt the heat rise in his cheeks. The toy comment stung. Okay, settle down, examinee 7111. Present Mike waved his hands. The 4th robot is the 0-pointer. Think of it like a stage hazard in a video game. It's huge, it's mean, and it's worth 0 points. If you see it, run away. I see. The glasses boy bowed perfectly to 90 degrees. Thank you for the clarification. And I apologize for the interruption. He sat down. Izuku sank lower in his seat. Tenya Ida, he noted, recognizing the boy from the entrance list. Engine quirk. Fast. Rigid thinker. He sees my equipment as a distraction. Izuku touched the cold metal of the case next to him. They all do. They think power comes from blood. They think heroism is something you're born with. He clenched his fist. I'm going to show them. I'm going to show them that iron hits harder than bone. Part 3. The changing room. The locker room for Battle Center B was a chaotic mess of testosterone and nerves. Students were changing into tracksuits, stretching, and psyching themselves up. Izuku rolled his case to a corner bench. He took a deep breath and placed his hand on the biometric scanner of the lock. Scan complete. Welcome, user, the case hissed. Pneumatic locks disengaged, and the heavy polymer shell unfolded like a blooming flower. The chatter in the locker room died instantly. Sitting inside the case, suspended in a cradle of foam and charging cables, was the Mark I. It was terrifying. It wasn't the sleek, colorful costume of a comic book hero. It was a machine of war. Roughly 7 feet tall, composed of scavenged titanium plating, exposed hydraulic piping, and heavy industrial servos. The metal was a patchwork of dull grays, gunmetal blacks, and the occasional flash of unpainted silver. A heavy cooling unit was bolted to the back, resembling a jetpack. What the hell is that? A student with rocks for hair whispered. Izuku didn't answer. He stripped off his jacket and shirt, revealing the scarring on his chest and the brilliant, blinding blue light of the arc reactor. The students gasped. The light was intense, casting harsh shadows in the room. Is that inside him? Izuku stepped onto the platform of the case. He initiated the auto-assembly sequence he and Mei had spent 3 weeks coding. Mechanical arms whirred to life. First, the greaves clamped around his legs with a heavy clank. The hydraulic pistons hissed as they pressurized. Next, the chest plate. Izuku aligned his reactor with the suit's intake port. The suit didn't have a battery. He was the battery. Click THROM. The chest piece locked in. The connection was made. The suit's eyes, 2 horizontal slits in the heavy helmet, flickered to life with a white glow. Finally, the gauntlets and the helmet. The faceplate lowered with a pneumatic hiss, sealing him in darkness for a split second before the HUD heads-up display booted up. System online. Reactor output, 100%. Hydraulics, nominal. Weapon systems, hot. Izuku took a breath. The air inside the suit smelled of filtered ozone and recycled oxygen. He moved his arm. The suit whirred, the heavy servo mirroring his movement instantly. He turned to face the room. He stood a foot taller than everyone else. He looked like a tank that had learned to walk. Is that allowed? A boy with elbows that looked like tape dispensers asked, his voice trembling. It's a support item. Izuku's voice came through the external speakers. It was processed, deeper, stripped of humanity. Yui allows support items if they are registered. This is registered. He walked toward the exit. Each step was a heavy thud clank that shook the floorboards. Ida, who was stretching near the door, stopped mid-motion. He stared up at the metal giant. You. Ida adjusted his glasses. You intend to wear that? It looks heavy. You'll be too slow. Inside the helmet, Izuku smiled. It was a predatory smile. Try to keep up. Part 4. The Urban Warfare. Battle Center B was a replica of a city district, complete with skyscrapers, roads, and streetlights. A massive crowd of examinees stood at the gate, jittery and tense. Izuku stood at the back, his thrusters venting heat in anticipation. The suit was heavy, nearly 400 pounds, but the hydraulics made it feel weightless. Hey, look at the Tin Man, someone laughed. He's gonna get stuck in a pothole. Izuku ignored them. His HUD was scanning the skyline. Wind speed 5 meters per second, temperature 12 degrees Celsius. Optimal flight conditions. Suddenly, from the tower above the gate, President Mike yelled, "Start!" The students froze. They looked around, confused. What's wrong? There are no countdowns in real battles. Go! 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 Before anyone else could process the command, a sound like a jet engine tearing apart the air erupted from the back of the crowd. Whoosh! Izuku ignited the boot thrusters. He didn't run. He launched. He flew over the heads of the stunned examinees, a streak of gray metal and blue fire. The backwash of his thrusters knocked the front row of students off balance. What the? Izuku hit the ground 50 meters into the city, skidding on his reinforced heels, sparks showering the asphalt. Target acquired. 3-pointer. 12 o'clock. A massive green robot, built like a tank with arms, rolled around the corner. It locked onto Izuku. Target located. Terminate. It fired a rubber missile. Izuku didn't dodge. He raised his left hand. Repulsor 1. Zwim. A beam of concentrated kinetic energy blasted from his palm. It intercepted the missile in midair, detonating it, and continued forward to slam into the robot's chassis. The robot didn't just fall. It was caved in. The metal groaned and shattered as the force threw the machine backward through a brick wall. 3 points. Izuku didn't stop. He engaged the leg servos. Jump. He vaulted 20 feet onto a streetlight, perched like a gargoyle. 2 1-pointers scurried below. Izuku raised both hands. Target lock. Fire. PWPW. 2 precise shots. 2 decapitated robots. 5 points. The rest of the students were finally catching up. Bakugo blasted past, using his explosions to fly. Ida was sprinting down the main avenue. Uraraka was touching robots to make them float, but Izuku was dominating the vertical space. He used short, controlled bursts of his thrusters to hop from building to building. He was a gunship. HUD alert, multiple targets. Sector 4. Izuku dropped from a rooftop, landing in the middle of a group of 4 two-pointers that had cornered a student with a tail. Get down! Izuku's amplified voice commanded. The tailed boy Ojiro ducked. Izuku spun. Euro stabilizer on. Omni Blast. He extended both arms and triggered the chest unibeam at 5% power, just a flash bang. The blinding light stunned the robot's optical sensors. While they rebooted, Izuku moved. It was a dance of destruction. He grabbed one robot by the head and crushed it with hydraulic grip strength. He kicked another, his iron boot shearing through its axle. He blasted the third and fourth with point-blank repulsor shots. 13 points. Thanks, Ojiro yelled, blinking spots from his eyes. Izuku didn't answer. He was already rocketing away. The observation room. In a dark room lined with monitors, the teachers of UA watched the chaos unfold. This year's crop is energetic, Midnight purred, watching a screen where Bakugo was violently dismantling a robot with his bare hands. That explosion kid is ferocious. Indeed, Ectoplasm nodded. But look at screen 7. The support item user. All eyes turned to Izuku. On the screen, the Mark-I was strafing a street, hovering 3 feet off the ground, blasting robots with surgical precision. Is that a student? Snipe tipped his cowboy hat. Looks like a military drone. Midoriya Izuku Nizu, the Chimera principal, said, holding a tablet. Registered quirk, none. Quirkless? Vlad King scoffed. Impossible. Where is he getting that energy output? That suit must have a nuclear battery. It does, All Might said. The symbol of peace stood in the back corner, disguised in his oversized yellow suit to hide his emaciated form. He was gripping the doorframe, his knuckles white. He built it himself, All Might said, trying to keep the pride out of his voice. He calls it an arc reactor. It's his heart. A technological singularity, Power Loader murmured, leaning close to the screen. The engineering required to stabilize that kind of plasma flow in a man-portable unit. It's genius. If he applied to the support course, I'd give him a diploma right now. But this is the hero course, Aizawa spoke up. His voice was dry, tired. He stared at the screen with critical eyes. He relies entirely on the machine. If the machine breaks, he's defenseless. A hero cannot be dependent on a battery. Perhaps, Nisa smiled, his whiskers twitching. But isn't a hero also defined by their ability to use the tools at their disposal? Let's see how he handles the true test. Nisa flipped open a red plastic cover on his console. Beneath it was a large button. The villain button, Nisa giggled. He pressed it. Battle Center B 3 minutes remaining. Izuku was panting. Inside the suit, the temperature was rising. The display read 45 degrees Celsius. Sweat stung his eyes, running down his nose where he couldn't wipe it. Score, 58 points. That should be enough, he gasped. Core temp is critical. I need to vent. He landed on a wide avenue. The suit hissed loudly as he opened the emergency thermal flaps on his shoulders and legs. Steam billowed out, shrouding him in a white cloud. Warning, the suit's voice synthesized. Fuel cells for thrusters at 15%. I know, Izuku muttered. Just hold together for 3 more minutes. The ground began to shake. It wasn't the rumble of the small robots. This was an earthquake. Dust fell from the buildings. Glass shattered. What the hell? A student nearby yelled. At the end of the main street, a shadow swallowed the sun. The 0-pointer. It was colossal. A moving mountain of green metal, easily 20 stories tall. Its treads crushed cars flat. Its arms were like cranes. The students froze, their necks craning up in horror. That's not a robot. Someone screamed. That's a monster. The 0-pointer roared, a mechanical grinding sound that vibrated in Izuku's chest plates. It raised a massive fist and smashed it into a building. Debris rained down like meteors. Run! Get out of here! The examinees broke. Panic took over. They turned and fled, stampeding away from the Titan. Izuku took a step back. His logic centers were screaming. 0 points. It's an obstacle. High risk, 0 reward. Flight capability is compromised. Armor integrity is at 80%. Engaging is illogical. He turned to engage his thrusters and retreat. Ow! The sound was faint, buried under the roar of the robot and the screams of the crowd. But the suit's audio filters picked it up. Izuku stopped. He turned back. Through the dust, his HUD highlighted a heat signature. Lying in the rubble, directly in the path of the zero-pointer, was the girl with the round face. Uraraka. Her leg was pinned under a massive slab of concrete. She was struggling, coughing in the dust, trying to lift it, but she was exhausted. The zero-pointer was advancing. Its massive tread was seconds away from crushing her. The other students were gone. Ida was sprinting away, looking back with fear but prioritizing survival. Izuku looked at the robot. He looked at the girl. Aizawa's voice echoed in his memory imagined. If the machine breaks, he's defenseless. All Might's voice. You cannot be a hero. Screw logic, Izuku growled. He diverted power. Reroute all non-essential systems to thrusters and chest capacitor, he commanded. Warning, life support will be compromised. HUD will go offline. Do it! The lights in his helmet died. The air circulation stopped. The suit became a stifling coffin. But the reactor in his chest flared brighter than the sun. Izuku crouched. The metal of his boots cracked the asphalt. Boom. He launched. He didn't fly gracefully this time. He was a bullet. He screamed as the G-force slammed him against the back of his armor. He shot straight up, trailing black smoke and blue fire. He flew past the zero-pointer's knees. Past its torso, he reached the face. The massive, three-eyed optical array stared at him. Izuku hovered there, his thrusters screaming, sputtering, dying. Hey! Izuku roared, his voice amplified to max volume. The robot paused. Izuku opened his arms. The chest plates slid back, fully exposing the arc reactor. The focusing lens whined as it charged to 300% capacity. The heat was unbearable. His skin felt like it was blistering. The shrapnel near his heart tugged painfully against the magnetic field. Smash! He unleashed the unibeam. It wasn't a pulse. It was a continuous torrent of white-hot plasma. A solid beam of energy erupted from his chest, carrying the force of a hurricane. It slammed into the zero-pointer's face. The metal didn't stand a chance. The beam melted through the reinforced faceplate, bored through the central processor, and blasted out the back of the robot's head. The recoil was catastrophic. The air around Izuku exploded. The Mark I's backplating blew off. The suit tumbled backward through the air, uncontrolled. The zero-pointer groaned. Sparks the size of fireworks cascaded from its melted neck. Slowly, majestically, the giant tipped backward, crashing away from the girl. Izuku was falling. Thrusters! He yelled, fuel depleted. He was falling from 20 stories up. The suit weighed 400 pounds. Terminal velocity. I'm going to die, he thought with strange clarity. At least I saved her. He saw the ground rushing up. Slap. Suddenly, the world stopped spinning. He hung in the air, inches from the pavement. Uraraka, face covered in dust and blood, had dragged herself out of the rubble. She had slapped the leg of his armor as he fell past her. Release! She gagged. She touched her fingers together. Gravity returned. Izuku dropped the remaining 6 inches. Clang! He lay on his back, staring at the sky. The suit was dead. The reactor was dim, pulsing weakly like a dying ember. Smoke poured from every joint. His body felt broken. Did I pass? He whispered. The buzzer sounded. Time's up. Part 5, The Aftermath. The silence that followed was heavy. Slowly, students began to creep back. They stared at the fallen giant robot. Then they looked at the pile of scrap metal that used to be the armored student. He one-shot the zero-pointer, someone whispered, with a laser. From his chest, Recovery Girl arrived pushing a cart. Make way! Make way! Oh dear, what a mess. She reached Izuku. She tapped the helmet. Can you hear me, Sonny? Yeah, Izuku's voice was faint, unamplified. Can you get me out? It's sealed shut. Power loader had to be called in with the jaws of life to pry the warped chest plate open. When they finally peeled the armor back, the crowd gasped. Izuku lay there, soaked in sweat, his shirt burned away. His skin was red and irritated around the reactor port. He was covered in bruises from the internal impact, but he was grinning. That was awesome, he wheezed. Recovery girl kissed his forehead. You reckless child. Your energy levels are dangerously low. That device is draining you. It kept me alive, Izuku murmured as the adrenaline faded and darkness took him. 1 week later, the letter arrived. Izuku sat at his desk, staring at the envelope. He had rebuilt the electromagnets, but the Mark I was a total loss. It was a pile of scrap in the corner. He opened the envelope. A holographic disc slid out. All Might appeared. I am here. As a projection, Izuku watched, his heart pounding. Young Midoriya. You did well on the written exam. Nearly perfect scores. A true genius. All Might paused on the recording. He leaned closer to the camera. But the practical, you got 58 combat points. A respectable score. You passed the cutoff comfortably. Izuku let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. He passed. However, All Might raised a finger. A hero is not judged solely by the villains he defeats, but by the lives he saves. The video changed. It showed the clip of Uraraka in the rubble. It showed the other students running, and it showed the Iron Giant flying into the jaws of death. You risked your life, and your expensive machinery, to save a single person when there were no points to be gained. All Might's voice swelled. That is the essence of a hero. And Yui does not overlook that. Rescue points, 60. The total flashed on the screen. 118 points. Izuku Midoriya. You have the highest score in the exam. You proved them wrong. You proved me wrong. All Might extended a hand. Come, young Midoriya. This is your Hero Academia. And bring your suit. You're going to need it. The hologram faded. Izuku sat in the silence of his room. The blue light of the arc reactor reflected in his tears. He looked at the scrap pile of the Mark I. Time for an upgrade, he whispered. Mark II needs to be faster. He pulled out a fresh blueprint, and maybe paint it red. The spring cherry blossoms were in full bloom, their delicate pink petals dancing on the wind that swept through the prestigious campus of UA High. For most students, this was a time of nervous excitement, of new beginnings. For Izuku Midoriya, it was a logistical nightmare. He stood at the door of Class 1A, his hand hovering over the handle. He wasn't wearing the standard gray blazer. Instead, he wore a modified version of the uniform. The trousers were reinforced with Kevlar weave, and the shirt was a custom-made, fire-retardant compression garment with a circular cutout in the center to accommodate the arc reactor. Over it, he wore a light, tactical vest that housed the auxiliary power regulators. But the real problem was the suitcase. Or rather, the suitcase. Standing next to him was a sleek, metallic silver briefcase. It looked unassuming, perhaps a bit larger than a standard attaché case, but it weighed 45 kilograms. Inside, folded into a marvel of spatial engineering, was the Mark II armor. Okay, Izuku muttered, checking his vitals on his wrist-mounted holographic display. Heart rate 78. Reactor output stable. Don't stutter. Don't be weird. Just be cool. He opened the door. The classroom was chaos. Don't put your feet on the desk. Ha! Who are you to tell me what to do, Four Eyes? Tenya Ida was chopping the air with his hands, berating Katsuki Bakugo, who was leaning back with an arrogance that seemed to physically occupy space. It's disrespectful to the upperclassmen who use these desks. Ida shouted. I don't care about some old extras. Bakugo spat. The noise stopped the moment Izuku rolled his case into the room. The heavy rubber wheels rumbled on the linoleum. Bakugo froze. His red eyes locked onto Izuku, and then onto the glowing blue circle in his chest. Deku, Bakugo growled. The sheer venom in his voice dropped the temperature of the room by 5 degrees. So you actually came. I passed, Kaken, Izuku said calmly, parking his case next to the desk behind Bakugo. Just like I said I would. Ida spun around. Ah. You are the Iron Student. He marched over, extending a stiff hand. I am Tenya Ida from Semi-Private Academy. I must apologize. I misjudged you at the entrance exam. I thought you were merely relying on toys, but your tactical decision to engage the zero-pointer was a display of true bravery. I hated that I failed to perceive the true nature of the test. Oh, thanks, Izuku shook the hand. I'm Izuku Midoriya. I'm Ochako Uraraka. The bubbly brunette from the exam popped up from behind Ida. Hey! It's you! The metal guy! Thanks for saving me. That laser thing was so cool. Is that the suit in the case? Can I see it? Is it heavy? She poked the silver briefcase. It's, yeah, Izuku blushed, rubbing the back of his neck. It's the Mark II. Portable deployment system. It's lighter than the Mark I, but the alloy is. If you're here to make friends, pack up and leave. The voice came from the floor. The class went silent. Lying in a yellow sleeping bag in the doorway, looking like a heavily caffeinated caterpillar, was a man with long, messy black hair and bloodshot eyes. He unzipped the bag and stood up, sipping a juice pouch. It took you 8 seconds to quiet down, he deadpanned. Time is limited. You kids are not rational enough. He stepped into the room. I'm your homeroom teacher, Shota Aizawa. A teacher? The class thought collectively. He looks like a hobo. Put these on, Aizawa said, pulling a gym uniform out of his sleeping bag. And meet me on the grounds. He paused, his eyes landing on Izuku. Midoriya, Aizawa said. Bring the tin can. The P grounds. The sun beat down on the students lined up on the dirt field. They wore their blue UA gym uniforms. Izuku stood at the end of the line. He had donned the tracksuit pants, but he kept his custom vest and undersuit on top. Next to him, the silver suitcase sat upright in the dirt. A quirk apprehension test? The class shouted in unison. What about the entrance ceremony? The guidance sessions? Uraraka asked. If you want to be heroes, you don't have time for such niceties, Aizawa said, turning his back to them. UA is a freestyle school. That applies to the teachers as well. He turned back, his eyes dark. Softball throw. Standing long jump. 50-meter dash. Endurance running. Grip strength. Upper body training. Seated toe touch. Sit-ups. You did these in middle school, right? Without your quirks. He held up a ball. The country still insists on prohibiting quirks when calculating averages. It's irrational. Bakugo, how far could you throw in middle school? 67 meters, Bakugo grunted. Try it with your quirk. Bakugo stepped into the circle. He grinned, stretching his arms. Die. He threw the ball, adding a massive explosion at the point of release. The ball rocketed into the sky, leaving a smoke trail. 705.2 meters, Aizawa read from his device. The class gasped. Awesome! We can use our quirks as much as we want? This looks like fun! Fun? Aizawa's expression darkened. You have 3 years to become heroes. You think it's going to be fun? Fine. Let's make it interesting. He swept his gaze over the class, lingering on Izuku. The student with the lowest total score will be judged to have no potential, and will be expelled immediately. HAA? Expelled? Uraraka cried. It's the first day. That's too unreasonable. Natural disasters, villain attacks, mass accidents, Aizawa listed. Japan is full of unreasonable things. Heroes are the ones who overturn them. He pointed at Izuku. Midoriya. You're up first for the 50-meter dash. Test 1, 50-meter dash. Izuku stood at the starting line next to Tenya Ida. Ida was revving his engines. Vroom. Vroom. Midoriya-kun, Ida said, looking at Izuku. Izuku was not wearing the suit. He was just standing there in his vest. Are you not going to deploy your armor? Without it you are quirkless? Izuku finished. He tapped the suitcase. Deployment takes 15 seconds. For a 50-meter dash, that's inefficient. Besides, Izuku tapped the arc reactor. I'm not totally unpowered. On your mark, the robot camera said. Get set. Bang. Ida exploded off the line. His engines roared, propelling him forward in a blur. Izuku didn't explode. But he didn't run like a normal human either. As his foot pushed off the block, the reactor flared. ZZT. A visible arc of blue electricity traveled down his leg, stimulating the fast-twitch muscle fibers. It was a technique he had developed during rehab, overclocking. By pushing excess voltage into his nervous system, he could force his muscles to contract harder and faster than biologically possible. It hurt. It felt like sticking a fork in a toaster, but it worked. Ida crossed the line. 3.04 seconds. Izuku crossed behind him. 5.12 seconds. It wasn't superhuman speed like Ida's, but it was Olympic athlete level, far faster than a normal teenager. Aizawa watched the readout, unimpressed. He's using the energy to stimulate his muscles. Clever. But risky. If he overloads, he'll seize up. Test 2, grip strength. Izuku picked up the dynamometer. This time, he placed his hand on the briefcase. Mark II gauntlet. Deploy. The suitcase hissed. A small panel opened, and a silver and red metal gauntlet shot out, clamping onto Izuku's right arm. The repulsor whined as it connected to the reactor's field. He squeezed the device. The metal crunched. The screen shattered. Error, the machine beeped. Mizo Shoji, who had just scored 540 kilograms, looked over. Whoa. Izuku sheepishly handed the broken device back to the robot. Sorry. Hydraulic calibration is still twitchy, Aizawa frowned. Stop breaking the equipment. Test 3, standing long jump. Bakugo blasted himself across the sandbox. Aoyama used his naval laser to propel himself backward. Izuku stepped up. He wore both gauntlets and the boot attachments of the Mark II now, a partial deployment. Thrusters at 20%, he muttered. He jumped. Whoosh. He cleared the sandbox entirely. He cleared the grass behind it. He landed near the fence, stumbling slightly. Cleared, the robot droned. Bakugo watched him, his hands twitching. He's just using gadgets. It's not real power. Test 5, ball throw. This was the moment. Uraraka had just scored infinity, demoralizing everyone. Midoriya, Aizawa called. Izuku walked to the circle. He was now fully suited up.